Marketing is dating. I want you to fall in love with me. Service is marriage repair. You fell in love with me, you spent the money on me, and now you want to step out.
That was Leslie. She's been teaching people how to write well for decades. I'm Matt Patterson, and in this episode, we talk about how to get your customer service team to write more concisely. It's The Supportive.
Hi, I'm Leslie O'Flahaven. My company's called eWrite, and simply I'm in the business of helping people learn to write well at work. That's my mission, and along the way have helped companies of all types and lots in customer support, because these are some of the most heroic writers we have. It feels like maybe shoveling, like being a professional shoveler. but it is heroic, because to come fresh to every written interaction with a customer when you're rather limited on the decisions you can make, when your output is measured in teaspoons, it's heroic to do the job well.
Leslie chose to discuss a newsletter I called Shaved Replies, and here it is. Customer support is a writing class based on constant, immediate feedback. If you write something that's unclear, people will let you know, either directly or indirectly by showing that they have not understood your point. For me, one side of a highly skilled support professional is their ability to be concise, to accurately, warmly, clearly convey answers to their customer in as few words as possible, but no fewer. By being concise, you are reducing your customer's effort. Conciseness is not being terse. It means communicating information clearly and quickly and making decisions about what matters and how to convey it. And that takes a real understanding of the product or service being supported. If you don't know it deeply, you can't safely decide what to leave out and what to include. You will tend to include extra details in case they are relevant. Making your answer shorter may take time. This is not a new idea. In 1657, Blaise Pascal made it clear. Reverend Fathers, my letters were not wont either to be so prolix or to follow so closely on one another. Want of time must plead my excuse for both of these faults. The present letter is a very long one, simply because I had no leisure to make it shorter. If your support letters are similarly wont to be prolix, here are some ways to be more concise. Read it out loud. You'll hear where it becomes long-winded or repetitive. Drop meaningless phrases like, I just wanted to. It adds words without adding value. Give a direct answer first. Start with the core answer. Add details and context as necessary. Point to further details elsewhere. Link out to knowledge-based articles if they're useful, but not essential to the answer. And pick an answer. Share the best answer. Let people know that there are other options if needed, rather than sharing them all at once. Above all, trust your own judgment. For any particular customer and question, these rules may not apply. The point is to always think about how to be concise, never to hit an arbitrary answer length.
Most people don't think about this topic at all, but you and I have thought about it a lot. And I think about conciseness in two important ways. And whenever I've drafted anything, I consider one first and the other second. So I think about conciseness as relevance first and brevity second. And relevance, of course, have I answered the reader's questions? Brevity, have I used as few words as possible to achieve the reader's goals? And brevity is very difficult to measure, and it's difficult to ensure, because if we use a limited measure such as word count, by God, these responses will be 200 words or less, this kind of thing, then we deprive ourselves of the choice about whether to express empathy, because we're trying to come in under that word count. So relevance first. Do I need all of this information? Brevity second. If I try to edit for conciseness and I knit the two together, then I personally come up with something that's too long.
Especially in support, it is possible to be too concise. But the other way you can go is, well, I'll just put every possible answer in there.
Right. And you and I both know some support or service professionals put everything in there out of a true deep desire to be as helpful as possible. And others do it, those wicked little rascals, they do it so the customer will go away. You know, as in, I did everything.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to say. I put it in there. Do the work and figure it out.
Yes, and of course it's counterproductive in terms of a customer service writing, because the more you put in, the less likely it is that someone's going to understand all of it, and you're just going to create new questions.
Yep, true.
So there is a true skill in identifying how much do they need to know and giving them exactly that much, but not more than that.
That's right. I agree.
But there is an amount of conciseness that requires skill, in that you need to know when you're talking to someone what is important information for this person in this context at this time, which might be different even for the same person if it was earlier on in the day. You know, like you've got to read the question that they asked you to try and calibrate how much are they going to need from me right now.
And those analytical reading skills, which we talked about years and years ago, the cognitive ability to understand what the customer is asking, not what they're saying, that's the first source of making sure what you've written is relevant. Do I understand what the customer is asking? But there's another guide I think quite helpful, comes from the principle of plain language writing, and that is plain language writing is utilitarian. People can use it. And so when we think about how much does this customer need? It's not easy to tell. But what if I favor information that helps them take action more than information that helps them understand context? I think that's usually safe, especially when the customer service writer is an expert and the customer is less expert. You know, thinking about what do they want to do? How do I help them take action versus how do I help them understand why the action I'm recommending is the best one to take? So that's how it's kind of a game of rock, paper, scissors, you know, and well, I guess it's rock, paper because I don't have a third part, but it's do, action, trumps no, context. Do trumps no. So if I'm confused, and why wouldn't I be confused as a customer support writer about how much to give this customer in a reply? But if I'm confused and I favor action, I'm probably going to be okay.
Yes, if that person can progress towards their goal, they will be satisfied, even if they then need to come back later and say, okay, well, now I need a bit more information, but they feel better about it, having made some progress, seen some action be taken.
Yes. And helping people take action is a quick way to reassure them that you care. You know, sometimes we think we need to say, empathy statements like, I too would be frustrated if this happened to me, you know, those kinds of things. And those are important also, to empathy statements we write. But if we help people do things, I think we're demonstrating empathy. And even if we kind of miss, I can think of situations where I've been the customer and I wanted to know, for example, why I couldn't upload my invoice into the procurement portal. Why, you know, but mostly I wanted to upload my invoice into the procurement portal. And if you help me do that, I'm basically going to know you care.
Thinking about that support context, there is a way in which you can be trying to do both sides there, in that the first chunk can be, okay, here's how you upload it. Like, this is what you got to do now. You want to get that thing uploaded? Here it is. If you stop there, you're fine. If you read no further, you've got all the value that you need. But you can then also say, okay, if you've done that, here's a little bit of context. This is probably what's happening. This is why it happened. This is how you could avoid it maybe next time.
You absolutely can do that, and you should do it, but you have to signpost the hell out of it. You know, you have to show the customer by the way you're formatting the information that some of it is essential and some of it is less essential. half pregnant, right? It's optional. So and we to do what I'm describing, we need section headings, and we need section headings that are full ideas, not merely placeholders. The word procedure is a placeholder for a procedure. If you use that as a section heading, it's a little helpful. If you use the section heading, how to upload an invoice to the portal, that's not a placeholder, that's a full idea. And so if I see a response when I asked for help and I see a response that looks kind of long, but I can see what the sections are, then I may save it. I may consider it bespoke documentation. Somebody made this for me on this Tuesday in May 2026, and I'll be really happy about that.
But you can think about that as letting somebody pick which part is important to them, like a good header. They may not need, maybe they'll scroll and say, I don't need to read this. I've seen the heading. That's enough for me to know I don't need that right now. I can leave it.
I think about the support writer too, who, if we ask them, why is it hard to write concisely? Or what are you struggling with as you're composing this reply? They're saying, I don't know how much information this person needs. I don't know. I can't tell. They wrote one sentence. I don't know how much they need. So being able to write a kind of a modular response with separate sections, if you think hors d'oeuvres, not lasagna, little pieces of yummy things you might read or not read, then it's easier for the support writer to write. And the other the other behavior a very modular response serves is this behavior of saving stuff in your inbox. And I'm sure you've done it, I've done it, but we know customers do it. They get an answer from us and they treat it like a museum artifact. They keep it forever. And if it's worthwhile advice, they may reread our response, not go get self-service. And I'm thinking about myself, uploading an invoice to the portal. It doesn't happen that often. So the next time I go to do it, if I need help, I know they helped me and I'm going to look at a saved email. And I have changed. In the interim, I kind of sort of remember how to do it, where the first time I didn't know how to do it at all. And so I need to read less than I did the first time.
Yes, that's a scary thought, I think, for technical writers, because you realize, it's not just my copy of the knowledge base, it's 10,000 little pieces of the knowledge base in everybody's inboxes.
Right. And let's make it even scarier thinking about, AI search tools retrieving and cannibalizing information from the knowledge base and serving it fast and bad, bad and wrong.
Yes, and maybe, years later.
Indeed. And that just speaks for the reasons that we put the effort into those knowledge bases, because good responses of other types will rely on them.
So what about practical ideas? Like, what could I do today that might make me write something more concisely?
Well, especially focusing on the brevity part, the kind of monkey simple, use fewer words, right? There are a few things we can do to write concisely. One is address the reader directly. So you and I'm sure, have met people along the way who have great big rolling suitcases full of baggage about what they're not allowed to do as business writers. And they think that they cannot use the pronoun you, or they cannot use the pronoun we or I. But when we allow ourselves to write in first person singular or plural to describe ourselves individually or our company, and when we allow ourselves to write using second person pronouns to address the reader directly, then we access habits of spoken language instead of kind of artificial, archaic, school-ish habits of written language. And we have much more practice speaking to each other, and we get feedback right away when we speak to each other, and we get less feedback right away when we write to each other. So anytime we can, in a professional way, make our written language more like our spoken language, we'll be using all of those tools that we get more practice with, and we'll write shorter. So if we use contractions, if we write in the imperative, if we let ourselves use our natural diction to express empathy. If we say in writing what we would have said, like, that's too bad, if we say that, then we'll just write fewer words and it's better.
Conciseness aside, it just feels like you're talking to a person, which in customer support, that is about 80% of what people want is like, oh, a person actually listened to me and is trying to help me.
Indeed. I have one other idea. Nobody likes to say to themselves, I'm going to write an active voice. Most of us don't think about syntax that way. We don't access our explicit grammar knowledge when we're answering a customer's email real quick. And I have a game I sometimes use in training sessions that helps people write a little bit more concisely. And it's a super simple game of cutting word count by 10% on something they've written. I have found over, these many years of teaching writing that if you go deeper, if you try to cut more than 10% of your content, you probably need to reconsider the scope of what you've written. So, for example, in a customer email, when you said, here's how to do this, and if that doesn't work, here's a workaround. If you say, I'm going to cut 50% of my word count, you probably have to lose the workaround. But probably you can cut 10% of the word count and leave the scope of everything you wanted to say. And it's a gimmick, it's a game, but for people who don't love words the way you and I do, this isn't their first strength. Maybe numbers are their first strength. It gamifies the task of writing, the challenge of writing concisely, and it's kind of fun. In your newsletter, you were listing wordy phrases such as "I just wanted to let you know that," and we don't need the "just" or most of the other writing. And I'm thinking of in the office of the director, that kind of phrasing. So, as a writing teacher, I could say, don't use two prepositional phrases in a row in the office of the director. Choose the object of the preposition and feature that and lose the other words. But most people are like, oh, please shut up. I don't think about writing that way. But if you say cut 10% of your word count, they can notice what they've done. So the game comes first.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something you could do with your team. Just to say, like, everybody gets the same slightly verbose answer and just come back and give me a 10% less version. And compare those versions and see, like, what have you cut out and what have I cut out? And maybe we could actually cut both of those out.
Right.
The beautiful thing about support is that you probably will have another 10 goes at explaining the same thing. So you can learn. And there is something about, and I think I wrote in the newsletter too, the greater the expertise you have in that subject, the more confidently you can cut out words because you know this is what's essential to this message. I can explain it to you in 5 different ways because now I am very confident that you're still going to get the core of it because I can identify that. Whereas when you're quite new in support, like, I don't know which of these paragraphs I could cut out because I'm not sure 100% that that's not vital information.
One solution to that, I'm new, how do I handle this wealth of information, is something you addressed in the newsletter, which is how important it is that whatever detailed version we're offering, we have a summary version at the beginning, and we need that, customers need that, but so do new employees. They need that summary version at the beginning.
It's that newspaper writing skill of start with the key details and you can get into all of the rest of it later on. And again, people can stop reading halfway down and still have got the point.
Right. And that, as the military writers call that, bluff, bottom line up front.
Yeah. So when you're doing training with people on conciseness, that game is a great way to do it. Do you ever run into problems where people talk about their company's voice and tone as requiring sort of a verboseness that they would not otherwise use?
Yes. Sometimes they do say that. This is a higher level writing skill and a different writing skill than the skill of conciseness, which is sustaining the company's tone. And I don't know. I have some pretty cynical feelings about brand voice and tone as it relates to delivering customer service, because the way the brand voice shows up in marketing materials is very different purpose. That's it. Marketing is dating. I want you to fall in love with me. Service is, marriage repair. You fell in love with me, you spent the money on me, and now you want to step out. What can I do to stop you? So I'm thinking of one time a few years ago when I was doing a social media writing workshop, and we were contrasting, I can't remember, I think it was Zara to Brooks Brothers, the brand voice in social. And Brooks Brothers sounds almost like a parody of itself, of its, silken ascot kind of sound. It's very, very fussy and hot airish. But that doesn't belong in any part of a support response except possibly the greeting. So they would write "Dear Leslie" instead of "Hi Leslie," and maybe the closing, like, next time you're going to the Kentucky Derby, please visit us for your sartorial needs, or something like that. But if I got to figure out how to make something work, please don't do that to me in the middle of the email. I think companies, they have a bigger training responsibility than they're often willing to shoulder for helping support writers sustain the brand voice. It makes me kind of say, yeah, marketing, you come down and answer these customers all day. You see if you can do it, So I think we might run into conciseness problems in our efforts to write in the organization's brand voice. And I also think that in support we should be largely exempt.
There is a level of consistency with brand voice. You want the person who reads the marketing and then talks to the salesperson and then talks to support to feel like it's all the same company, but they shouldn't.
Right. But Matt, also, if you think about the brand voices existing on this kind of a continuum, and we're going from formal over here on the left to very informal on the right, or reverent to irreverent, if those are the two extremes, most brand voices, sit somewhere in the kind of a little bit less than formal and a little bit less than fully reverent. And really, support just needs to not sound angry, obscure, clueless. It's if we let them write if we encourage them to write in first and second person, and we encourage them to apologize sincerely and to empathize sincerely, then we're basically going to sound like we're in most modern companies' brand voice.
In a previous job, when I was writing some internal training for support teams, and one of the areas that I had was conciseness, and I picked an example, like I'd just gone back years and found like a quite long wordy answer and put it in the training module. It's like, we don't want to do this, and rewritten it to a shorter version. And then I hired a guy for support who'd actually worked in support before, in the same team. Like, yeah, you could see where this is going.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Halfway through the training module, saw his own answer.
Oh, I've done it. I've done it. We've all done it. It's so bad because it violates a principle, which is I want you to feel safe and calm in here. And everyone's like, oh shit, he's going to do mine next. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it's so bad.
Unfortunate. Mm-hmm. But he did learn.
Yes, he did.
I mean, and it's not his fault that I didn't teach him that properly the first time.
Right. After he stopped weeping, he did learn.
He did, yeah. At this point, Leslie told me that she'd actually changed her professional writing advice pretty recently.
Yeah, 30 years in business, and I am over it with spelling, punctuation, and grammar, because the tools we have to check spelling, punctuation, and grammar are powerful enough to cover for almost any error we can make. And this hasn't been true all along, but AI is better than Microsoft Editor, and Microsoft Editor, while a ghastly hellscape of a tool, is better than spell check, and we finally got there. So I'm not ready to say you don't need to learn how to use an apostrophe correctly, but I am happy to say that if the way your brain works makes it really hard for you to learn how to use an apostrophe correctly, then use AI correctly and check your work before you send it. You'll be fine. So that's a big change. I wasn't saying that in 2025, but I am saying that now. You
Yeah.
just you do have a tool that will catch your mistakes. And I know that will make some people really sad, but really nobody's older than me or more English teachery than me, and I'm not sad.
Well, the point of language is just to communicate something from one brain to another brain, isn't it? And if you're doing that, that's what it's about. And if we get hung up on whether or not I use the correct, well, my particular issue is always where do I put my commas? I'm constantly putting commas in the wrong spot. But yes, which is, I think, the point to say, it's not a moral judgment to say the way that I think about things, I find that hard. We have tools that can do it for us. Just use them. Don't worry about it.
Right. But, the change is you really do have to use the tool. There's never been any excuse not to run spell check ever. Even in 1998, there was no excuse not to run it, and people didn't run it. You really do have to use the tool. Now you can just be sure that it will create correct copy for you, whereas before, I collect the mistakes Microsoft Editor suggests I make. And I try to get real mad about them, but no one cares. But I do collect them. But, Gemini's not telling me to make mistakes. Gemini's fixing them.
What do you think about the combination of AI writing and conciseness?
Well, I think the tool's wonderful at the brevity part, and it is not capable of the relevance part. Because understanding what's relevant to this customer is my job, is a human job. And especially if you add in the customer's mood or their level of frustration, what becomes relevant is a little different. So I literally need the answer on how to upload my invoice into the portal, but I've been trying for a long time, and I followed the documentation, and something's wrong in the portal. In my case, it's usually there's an apostrophe in my last name, and I need a little empathy from the response because I'm really upset. I've wasted a lot of time, and the AI tool can't do that well enough, and it will not sound sincere, and it may be slightly off, like kind of spoiled yogurt or something like that. So we need the human to make sure that the response is relevant, and the tool's really good at brevity. When you were asking, did I have any other training games before? One is coming to mind now, where we would show, in a training class, we would show people the human version and maybe the AI version, or the human version not concise, the human version concise. We're going to show them pairs of versions, and they would have to, pull out what was changed. Can I see the same kind of change twice? It reminds me of that game, the Spot the Differences game, where you get the two line drawings are really close, and you have to find the 6 differences. That would be a good game.
Not everyone's interested in language in the same way, but if you're in support, it is such a useful skill to develop, to be able to identify what can I leave out here? How can I make that message clearer just by removing some of the stuff that's surrounding it and that's obscuring it? And then knowing, oh, I've gone too far and now it sounds too abrupt. It sounds aggressive almost when you leave it so bare.
I think about people who work in support have what I would call the soul of service. They have the desire, the motivation, the skill set to help customers. And for most of them, that's really what they want to do. I want to help you. So we would position conciseness as a writing skill we need if we're going to help people. But candidly, sometimes people who work in support just want that customer to go away. Take the answer and go away. not every customer, but maybe this one, and conciseness is a good skill, is a necessary skill there also. So
Yeah.
if you're, if you're the angel that one day and the devil the next day, you still need conciseness to get the outcome.
Thank you, Leslie, for a fun and helpful chat. If you ever need writing training, visit her site, eWrite. She's got tons of great advice and tools and training there. I'm Matt Patterson. This has been The Supportive. Meet me back here in a couple of weeks for my conversation with Pavel, a veteran support leader who, at the time I talked to him, had only just been laid off despite having been a driver of AI adoption for his team.